You get lice for all the right reasons, and it is for being social.
Welcome to Talking About Kids. I am your host, R. Bradley Snyder, researcher, activist, and author of The 5 Simple Truths of Raising Kids. Lice. We have checked for them, we have been checked for them, and we have worried about them. But how much do we really know about lice? In light of some relatively new guidelines from the American Academy of Pediatrics, I asked Ilene Steinberg, founder and CEO of the Center for Lice Control and the so-called Lice Queen, to come on the podcast and help me comb through the myths and facts about lice. This podcast was sponsored in part by the Arizona Department of Health Services Must Stop Bullying campaign through its Title V Maternal and Child Health Program. For more information, go to muststopbullying.org. And now, the interview.
When my oldest son, who is now 26, when he was 2, there was a big outbreak at his preschool. And of course, he got lice. I knew nothing about it. I went to the store. I actually ended up going to several stores because there was no product left on the shelves. Eventually, I got product. I followed the instructions. I cleaned his hair. People told me you have to clean the house. So I think I did more of a fine-tooth comb cleaning my house. But I did the follow-up. I think it was 10 days later. And so that's what it was. You do a treatment and then you do a treatment in 10 days and you're done. And that's what I thought. I kept looking at his hair, waiting, hoping that he didn't get it from somebody else because, it's all these kids.
Right.
And every couple of days there was a new case. So eventually it was like 3, maybe 4 weeks later, they at the preschool said nobody can come into the school until their head is checked. And if your kid is clear, you drop them off, you go your merry way, they go to class. So I had my daughter, who was about 6 months old at the time, and she's in her little baby carrier, and I'm walking with my son, and we're waiting in line, and we're talking to the other moms, and it was early on in the school year. It was probably around this time, 24 years ago. And I'm meeting new people. Well, we get up and they look at his head and they look at me and they say he has it. So the next move was, if the child has it, then they check the mom. I sit down. Before I even sat down completely,
Wow.
she looked at the top of my head, the
Right.
person who was checking, and said, "Oh my God, you have it." But she said it pretty loudly. So just about everybody in our area heard.
Right.
And I really was a new mom there, and I was completely devastated. I was defeated. I was kind of freaked out.
Right.
Um, if it, so now we both have it. My daughter at the time had no hair in her head. Fortunately, she wasn't a factor in it. And their dad traveled, so he was out of the country for work. So my neighbor, who became a really good friend and was a former employee of mine, along the way, helped me treating lice. She came over and nitpicked us. I didn't want to use
Okay.
the product anymore because I knew either I did something wrong or it didn't work. I didn't know at the time, but I was anxious about putting this horrible chemical on his head.
Right.
And so she helped me. And if it wasn't for her, I might still have lice. It took me 5 years to
Right.
mentally get over it. And honestly, it took about 2 months until I realized we were done. I was cleaning my
Wow.
house every day. I was
Right.
checking his head every day. It was overwhelming.
Well, I suspect that there are people who are listening right now and are itchy just listening to your story, right? It just kind of, there's a visceral reaction to lice. So,
Yeah.
just so everybody is clear on this, what are lice?
Lice are, they're parasites. They're human parasites. They do not fly. They do not jump. They
Okay.
crawl quickly on the hair shaft. And they're actually rarely on the scalp.
Okay.
So, and they lay their nits on human hair, which they put their knit in the perfect spot on the hair shaft
Mm.
to incubate and then hatch. They need heat and moisture from their host. So they don't go on our pets and they're not in our house. So the
Right.
house is not a source of reinfestation, which is comforting.
And you've used this word knit a couple of times, and I apologize. I don't mean to sound ignorant, but what is a knit?
The knit is the egg of the louse.
Got it. Got it. One of the things that I think all of us are asking when we're getting these messages back from school about our kids, or as we're thinking about our own childhood and what we went through at schools when we were growing up, is well, how dangerous are lice? What's the danger that they pose to humans?
Not, none at all.
Ah,
So I'll
yeah.
preface that. They're
Right.
not dangerous at all.
Okay.
Head lice are they're not known, at least not yet, to
Right.
spread any disease. In fact, so head lice is not a medical issue.
Okay.
It's a social issue.
Got it.
It's theoretically socially unacceptable to have lice. However, here's the twist.
Okay.
You get lice for all the right reasons, and it is for being social.
Okay. Explain all of that, please, Eileen.
Okay. So you get head lice from direct head to head or hair
Hmm.
to hair contact. And
Hmm.
think about it. When do we have head to head contact? We hug,
Right.
we snuggle. When you pick up a kid and you let them sit on your hip and they wrap their legs around you and they put their head on your shoulder,
Yeah.
if you have long hair, your hair is touching their hair. Little people are space invaders.
Right.
They're all in our space. They're preschool teachers, they're siblings, they're parents, and that's, you know. So, no, they're not dangerous. They're a social issue. Um, and, it's not, it's an allergic reaction to the
Right.
bug bite that makes us itchy.
Okay.
So, there's that, but it's not a dangerous thing. And there's to this point, there's no known anaphylactic reaction to a
Right.
louse bite. So that's not
That's
even
amazing.
an
Right.
issue. Yeah.
And I think, listeners to the Talking About Kids podcast will obviously, will hopefully know about check ins. This is a process that is recommended for classrooms, that a teacher, when students are entering the classroom, that the teacher is at the door of the classroom and having some sort of contact with every student as they come in. This is a hand on the shoulder. This is looking at them in the eye. This is assessing where they are that day so that you can develop a relationship with them, know that they're welcome. And so I'm so glad that you say that the lice isn't dangerous and that the transmission of lice is from doing the right thing, because I don't want people to feel like, oh, I'm dirty if I've gotten this lice, and I don't want to actually have any contact with the kids in my classroom now because I don't want to spread these lice. So I think that's a really important message. There,
Eh, Also, not to interrupt, but also
yeah,
let's also think about the kid if they get lice,
right,
what happens in that moment. We're going to go back to the social aspect of it. In their little view of the situation, the teacher gets freaked out. the nurse or the director of the school calls the parent. They have to come pick them up. Mom is now upset. This little person, what did they do wrong to make everybody spring into action? And I like to say two things. One, only the sweetest people get lice. And if you're a good teacher and you got lice from a student, you're a great teacher or babysitter or nanny. It's a compliment. And if the statistic is if two or more siblings get lice in a
Right.
family, 90% of moms get it. So by the time the mom sits in my chair in the salon and I do a combing head check on her,
Right.
she now is hoping she has lice. Because if she doesn't, I tell her she needs to snuggle more.
She needs to hug her children more.
Right.
Absolutely. That's so interesting. And this is in line with, I know we discussed offline that the American Academy of Pediatrics updated all of their standards around the care and treatment of lice just at the end of last year. And one of the things that they pointed out is that mass school screenings, as the kind that you described in your introduction, don't work. There's no data that suggests that that is a good way to stop kids from getting lice. And yet, schools continue to do that and harming kids in all the ways that you said.
Yeah. I agree with the American Academy of Pediatrics, which once I explain myself, people will understand that that is um, the reality is that a school nurse checking a class for head lice visually, she's only going to find the obvious case.
Okay.
And what tends to happen is they'll call everybody in, they'll look really quickly. One of the biggest misconceptions is head lice appears first or most behind the ears and the nape of the neck, and that's completely false. So a lot of school nurses will just have kids in the effort of time because however many kids are in the classroom and they have other work to do. It's not
Right.
like they have half the afternoon to check everybody properly. They lift the hair up. They tell the kid to bend their head down, lift their hair up, and look. They're looking for what looks like a heat rash, which is if you have the visual reaction to head lice, it looks like a
Okay.
little red bumps, a little heat rash, or they're looking for nits. They're only going to find a case that has enough activity to see visually. And the reality of lice control is finding it when there's very little bit to see.
Okay.
So they'll check and then they might be checking again in a week and another case pops up in a week and every 2 to 3 weeks is a new round or a new cycle.
Okay.
And so my one of my soapboxes is that it's not the school's responsibility to control an outbreak for a class because you're not talking about a school, you're not talking about one kid in a class and the school nurse checking the class. What if they have siblings? There could be
Right.
three classes now involved.
Right.
And you can't expect a school nurse to control an outbreak for an entire school. Parents should learn how to do a combing head check and know what to look for and control lice for their family.
I love that. And I want to get at some of your tips, Eileen, for treating and preventing the spread of lice. But I just want to add that one of the other things that the American Academy of Pediatrics points out in their latest guidelines is that you're not supposed to keep kids home from school for lice.
Right.
It's the case that you're denying them. There's two things that they point out. One, they're being denied those educational opportunities, but there's a tremendous stigma that's hurting them socially, which is also being reflected in their academic achievement. So I'm glad to hear you echo that. So, how should we go about then preventing and treating lice? What do you want to start with, prevention or treatment?
Prevention.
Okay. How do we prevent lice? And if it's the burden of the family, if that's where the prevention needs to occur, not at the school level, not in these mass screenings that don't do anything, how do we prevent our kids from getting lice?
So, first and foremost is detection.
Hmm.
finding head lice. And one of my missions is to educate parents on how to properly check for head lice, of recognizing the life cycle, understanding the life cycle. From exposure, a person has for about 14 days before they are actually contagious.
Okay.
So from exposure, it's 14 to almost 20 days.
Wow.
So if you find lice in that very short window, that's prevention. I treat people that use all kind of preventative products, whether it's an essential oil or products that are widely used. It's a very, very big business, lice
Right.
prevention products. I actually don't have one because I treat too many people that rely on them. And if you're putting an aroma on somebody's head, it may work for as long as the aroma is strong enough.
Okay.
And
Okay.
to rely on that, if it works an hour, how long is a kid in school or at a play date or at a
Right.
sleepover even? So not relying on that, doing a combing head check with a knit comb is really the most effective way. And I developed two really easy ways because I know we're busy. I have four kids. They're older now, but when they were little, they would come out of the tub or shower. I'd detangle their hair. For the boys, or not boys, but short hair, I called it the Elvis. And you comb straight back with the knit comb and you wipe it into a white paper towel because knits, the lice eggs,
Yeah.
and the actual bugs are brown. They
Wow.
mimic the color of your hair.
Okay.
They're like chameleons. So by doing that, you're going to find it at a very early stage, way before you're going to see it. Um, and if you don't have a knit comb, looking visually once a week. So the
Okay.
combing head check, knowing that it takes 14 to 20 days to be contagious. If you check twice a month, about 15 days apart, so I like to say the beginning of a month and the middle of the month,
Right.
that's the best lice control.
And
So you check, you don't see it, you can say woohoo and move on to the next, you know.
right.
But the feeling of relief, even that I got checking my kids, knowing that they were clear, it was like empowering because you have control over an outbreak. And notice that I didn't say preventing lice because you can't prevent getting lice. If you have hair on your head and you come
Right.
in contact with somebody that has it, doesn't matter how long or straight or curly, what ethnicity you are,
Right.
you could get head lice. So for treating, there are so to wrap that up, I say anybody that comes through my salon, don't look for it, comb for it.
Okay.
Okay. Um, let's say you find evidence. It doesn't matter if there are 3 nits or there are 3,000. You still need to treat
Okay.
because we are dealing with a parasite. And we want to make sure that this is done. So there are many different treatments. We have the over-the-counter products, permethrin-based products. There's prescription products. While they're pesticide products, they're relatively safe as long as they're not misused or overused. However, the bugs have become immune to,
Yeah.
while it used to work really well, it's not the product so much, it's the method of how they're killing the bugs.
Okay.
And the neurotoxin method no longer is as effective. So, my new thing that I say in the salon, and this is really the last, you know, 8 to 10 years,
Okay.
people have lice because somebody tried to get rid of it and didn't. So, the products are failing. People are doing more than they should be doing, and it's still not as effective. However, if you're using that and you're relying on it, like I did when my son was 2, but more to how I started treating lice, we had it at overnight camp 8 years later, and I worked there for my pediatrician. And it once again didn't work. And that's when I realized it wasn't my fault. It was the product not working.
Okay.
Um, it's what most people experience if they're treating with the over the counter products. They're not getting rid of it necessarily from the products, they're getting rid of it because they do so much work on the hair, not cleaning the house. We didn't
Right.
miss something in the house to still have lice. It's product failure, not people failure, the product. So knowing that they grew resistant. A lot of companies like
Right.
mine and different products have popped up. Um, and so there are enzyme treatments. There are salt treatments that heat it, like dry it out, but it
Okay.
also dries your scalp and your hair. So they're not always great. And then there's heated air treatments. I have tried them all. I worked
Hmm.
with the heated air device company when they first got clearance for their device, and I trained a lot of their technicians early on. And really, through trying other things, they work better than permethrin. They even work better than most prescriptions.
Okay.
However, for me, I'm so pragmatic in nature that I was constantly trying new things and trying
Hmm.
different things to come up with the best process. So I feel like my process that I developed is the most effective, safest, and quickest way to deal with lice. And I'm not dealing with it as an infestation of lice today. I'm
Right.
treating not only the life cycle, but through the treatment process, I'm teaching the parents and the kids what to do for the future. Because once you learn how to comb while you're treating, now you have the chops
Right.
to be able to do that combing head check comfortably, because that's a breeze compared to actually doing a nit removal.
Right.
Um, so there are different treatments. My suggestion would really be for people to do the research and to communicate with people, because after you treat, if you're telling school may or may not communicate to the class or the community. And if they do, a child in your class has lice.
Right.
They're not saying who. So then here's the other part of the that adds to the stigma, and I see it all the time in the salon. Parents will then say, who was sent home from school?
Right.
Who this? Who that? Who do you sit next to? Who are you next to on the bus? And they start on this fishing expedition, which then in a certain kid's mind is going to think, what did they do wrong?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So being mindful of all of that, if you communicate to who your child has been around, and it's not who they were around for the last few days, we're going back 3 weeks.
Okay.
So if you think about that, think about who they've been with in the last 3 weeks, not necessarily who they gave it to, but who they got it from. It works both ways. It's the right thing to do. It's the hardest phone call to make. Let that be the hardest phone call you ever have to make. It's really not that bad in the scheme of
Right.
things. However, once you rip off the band aid and tell people, you now give yourself the ability to be communicated to in the future as well.
Absolutely.
You don't want that call, but the person that's so freaked out about lice and so vocal about their anxiety about it, they're the hardest person to tell. And often, if they were exposed, they end up with a good dose of what they were so
Yeah.
afraid of.
Well, I mean, I think I appreciate that so much because I think normalizing it, and you said it early on, like everybody gets lice, right? So if you set that expectation and you get lice from being around people, which is what we're wanting people to do, to have those relationships, you get it from that kind of contact. I mean, I think that's going to go far to removing that stigmatization. I mean, I know that we've been talking about kind of the evolution here in our understanding of head lice, but I know that my own mother equated head lice with being dirty, right? So she would try to figure out which kid in the classroom had it because they must have a dirty home, and must not take showers regularly, or something like that. So I'm glad to see that we've absolutely evolved from that. Eileen, you've done so much research over the years and so much work, and treated so many people over the years. Do you have any other tips or tricks for the people?
It's almost a rite of passage. I wish I could say that I could take away the ick factor,
Right.
but I can't. Nobody wants bugs in their head. Understanding that in history, two things: it meant you were a leader in your community if you had lice. And on the other side of the equation, it was also a sign of health
Hmm.
if you were a sustainable host of lice.
Yeah.
And also, they never had treatments. Well, they had treatments throughout the years, but typically people always had lice. So they had knit combs, very similar to the ones we use today, and cleaned it up, but never really got rid of it. So while it's a, a nasty thing that a nasty rite of passage
Right.
that we get, it's way less, I don't want to say bad for you because it's not bad for you at all. So I don't want to put that thought in people's minds, but it's it's the most benign of things that can happen to us. We're quicker to talk about, other bodily functions with kids,
Absolutely.
but head lice is such a taboo thing. The more we're able to talk about it and and make sure people understand that nobody does anything wrong, and the
Hmm.
fact that it didn't start with the outbreak that's at your daycare center or your elementary school. It's in the Bible. It's There's knit combs that have come out of ancient tombs, and recognizing that only the sweetest people get it. Get over it. Learn how to do a head check. Do those head checks on twice a month, and with that, you um, you have total control. I'm the Center for Lice Control. My goal is to empower people to feel like they have control. One other thing I'll mention is there's no age
Hmm.
associated with head lice. People come in here, my kids in middle school, I thought we were done with this. If middle school students or high school students are friends with people that have younger siblings, they're at risk. If they babysit, they're
Right.
at risk. Teachers are at risk. Grandparents, great parents. So the oldest person I treated got lice from her great grandson. She
Oh,
was
wow.
nine. She was 95 at the time. She's still amazing, and I think in over 100 now. Um, and the youngest person we treated was 3 weeks old.
Oh, wow.
Their mom had it from a younger sibling,
Yeah. Right.
and it wasn't found until the baby was 3 weeks old. But you're so close to a newborn, and siblings are so close, and newborns have hair,
Yeah.
some of them.
Wow. Well, Eileen, I know that you said that, it takes a lot to remove the ick factor, but I think that you've done a lot to remove the ick factor. So thank you so much for agreeing to come on to Talking About Kids. This was a treat and really surprising because I think that I entered with that ick factor. So thank you so much.
So I have a coupon code for 15% off of a kit, because the kit, which I sell on Amazon, has everything that a person needs to detect and treat lice, and the good information on what little bit to clean in the house, and really gives you a sense of lice control. And it makes the person feel like they are their own professional nitpicker, which is what lice treatment people are, nitpickers. Um, and the code is CLC take 15 off.
Excellent.
So it's
And
15% off.
I will add that to the description of the podcast as well for the listeners. So thank you so much, Ilene.
Great. Thank you, Brad. This was really a treat.
That was Ilene Steinberg. For more information about Ilene and a link to her professional lice treatment kit, please visit talkingaboutkids.com. Talking About Kids listeners who use the code CLC Take 15 off, that is CLC TAKE 15OFF, will receive 15% off that kit. Our theme song is by The Senators. For more of their music, go to thesenatorsmusic.com. And remember, kids are young goats and young humans, and the difference is that young goats are easier to manage.